The night I found out my mother had stolen my husband, everything changed. I never thought my mother would do such a thing. She was always loving, always supportive. But that night, everything turned dark. My husband, Joe, had been acting strange for weeks. He came home late, avoided my questions, and even stopped looking me in the eye. I thought it was stress from work. I never imagined it was because of my own mother. One evening, I decided to follow him. I knew it wasn't right, but I needed to know what was going on. He drove to my mother's house. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would he be visiting my mother at such a late hour, without telling me? I parked a distance away and quietly walked to the house. The front door was slightly ajar, and I could hear their voices inside. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the tone was clear. They were arguing. "You promised me," my mother's voice said, sharp and angry. "I can't keep doing this," Joe replied, sounding desperate. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept closer. I peeked through the gap in the door and saw them standing close, too close. My mother reached out and touched his face, and he didn't pull away. I couldn't breathe. "She'll find out," Joe said. "It's not right." "She doesn't have to know," my mother whispered, leaning in. "She'll never know." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. I didn't want to see more, but I couldn't move. I couldn't believe what was happening. They kissed. My mother and my husband kissed right in front of me, as if they didn't care who saw. It felt like my world was shattering into a million pieces. I ran back to my car and drove home in a daze. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How could they betray me like this? When I got home, I felt sick. I knew I had to confront them, but I didn't know how. The betrayal cut deep, and the pain was unbearable. How could my own mother do this to me? The next morning, I sat in the living room, waiting for Joe to come back. When he finally did, I couldn't hold back. "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "I know everything." His face turned pale, and he looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear. "Adebisi, Don't say anything," I interrupted. "Just leave. I can't look at you right now." As he packed his things, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. How did things come to this? What would I do now? But the worst was yet to come. I still had to face my mother. The next day, I went to my mother's house. My heart was heavy with the weight of betrayal. As I stood on her porch, I hesitated. I didn't know what I would say, or if I even had the strength to confront her. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. I knocked on the door, and she answered with a bright smile, as if nothing was wrong. It made my blood boil. "Adebisi, my darling, what a surprise," she said, reaching out to hug me. I stepped back, refusing her embrace. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered, and she led me inside. We sat in the living room, the same place where so many happy memories had been made. Now it felt tainted. "I know about you and Joe," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw you last night." Her eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Adebisi, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "How you could betray your own daughter. How you could steal my husband." She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then how was it supposed to be?" I demanded, my voice rising. "How could you do this to me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "It just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said coldly. "And now I have to live with it." For a moment, we sat in silence. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second stretching out like an eternity. Finally, she spoke. "I love him," she said softly. And he loves me. I felt a stab of pain, but I forced myself to stay calm. And what about me? Your daughter. Do you love me? She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. Of course I do. But sometimes love isn't simple. I shook my head. This isn't love. It's betrayal. I stood up, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I don't think I can ever forgive you. Either of you. As I walked out of her house, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I knew my life would never be the same. The trust one had once had in the two people I loved most was shattered beyond repair. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't stay in the house Joe and I had shared, so I packed my things and moved in with a friend. I tried to focus on work, on rebuilding my life, but the pain was always there, lurking in the background. Weeks passed, and I avoided my mother and Joe as much as possible. But one day, my friend handed me a letter. "It's from your mother," she said quietly. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding. I didn't want to read it, but I knew I had to. I took a deep breath and opened it. "Adebisi," the letter began, "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know how sorry I am. I know I've lost your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But please, let's talk. I want to try to make things right, if that's even possible." I felt a surge of anger, but also a flicker of hope. Could we ever mend this rift? I didn't know, but I knew I had to try. The next day, I went to her house again. The place that had once felt like home now felt foreign and hostile. She greeted me at the door, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat down, and for the first time in weeks, we talked. It was a long, painful conversation, filled with tears and apologies. She explained how it had started, how they had tried to fight it, but ultimately failed. "I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for," she said, her voice breaking. "But I want to try. I want to be your mother again." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. "It won't be easy," I said quietly. "But I want to try too." As I left her house, I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Trust would have to be rebuilt, wounds would have to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. My mother and I met regularly, trying to rebuild the fragile pieces of our relationship. It wasn't easy, and every meeting was a reminder of the betrayal. Joe, on the other hand, stayed away. I didn't hear from him, and I didn't want to. He had made his choice, and I was trying to move on. One night, as I sat in my new apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The message was short and cryptic. "Meet me at the old tree by the river tonight. It's important. T." I felt a chill run down my spine. Why now? And why at the old tree, a place we used to go when we first started dating? I debated ignoring it, but something told me I needed to go. The night was dark and quiet as I walked to the river. The old tree loomed ahead, its branches swaying in the wind. I saw a figure standing there, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Joe. He looked different, worn and tired. As I approached, he turned to face me, his eyes filled with regret. "Adebisi," he began, his voice soft. "I needed to see you." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my composure. "What do you want, Tond?" He took a deep breath. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Your mother, she manipulated me. I was weak. I should have resisted, but I didn't. I'm so sorry." His words stung, but I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy. And now what? You think you can just apologize and everything will be okay? No, he said, shaking his head. I know I can't undo the damage I've done. But I needed you to know the truth. I still love you, Adebisi. I never stopped. The pain in his eyes was real, but so was mine. Love. You call this love? You and my mother destroyed everything we had. He looked down, defeated. I know. And I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. I needed to tell you the truth. I needed to see you one last time. I took a step back, my mind racing. Could I ever forgive him? Did I even want to try? Joe, I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I said, my voice trembling. You and my mother, you broke me. He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I understand. I just hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. As I turned to leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. But also a tiny spark of something else. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the beginning of acceptance. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I needed to find myself again, to rebuild my life on my own terms. And maybe, just maybe, one day I would find a way to heal from this betrayal. But for now, I needed to take it one step at a time. The days following my encounter with Joe at the river were a blur. I tried to focus on my work, on rebuilding my life, but the pain of the betrayal still lingered. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother and Tom together, and the hurt would wash over me all over again. One evening, as I was packing away some of Joe's things to finally move on, I found a small, worn-out journal tucked away in a drawer. It was Joe's handwriting. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, curiosity getting the better of me. The entries were dated over several months. As I read through them, my heart sank. He wrote about his confusion, his guilt, and his struggle to end the relationship with my mother. There were entries about how he tried to distance himself, how he was consumed by regret, but also how he felt trapped. One entry, in particular, caught my eye. She threatened to tell Adebisi lies about me if I tried to leave her. She said she would ruin my life. I don't know what to do. I love Adebisi, but I don't know how to escape this without hurting her. My hands trembled as I read the words. It felt like a punch to the gut. Had my mother really manipulated him that much? The realization that my mother could be so vindictive shook me to my core. I needed answers. I drove to my mother's house, the journal clutched in my hand. When she opened the door, she looked surprised to see me. Adebisi, what brings you here? She asked, trying to sound cheerful. I held up the journal. We need to talk. We sat in the living room, and I handed her the journal. She flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from confusion to guilt. When she finished, she closed it and looked at me with tears in her eyes. I didn't want to lose you, she said softly. I thought if I kept Joe close, I could keep you close too. But I see now that I was wrong. I let my jealousy and fear take over. Jealousy. Fear. Of what? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Of losing you, she admitted. You were growing up, building your own life. I was scared of being left alone. When Joe showed interest in me, I felt needed. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop. Her confession left me speechless. I saw the pain and regret in her eyes, but it didn't erase the hurt she caused. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said, my voice breaking. But I need time to figure things out. I need space. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Take all the time you need, Adebisi. I'll be here, waiting, hoping one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. As I left her house, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth, as painful as it was, had come to light. I knew the path to healing would be long and difficult, but at least now I could start that journey with a clearer understanding. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I surrounded myself with friends and family who supported me, and I sought therapy to help process my emotions. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I kept my distance from Joe and my mother, but I didn't cut them off completely. Healing took time, and I wasn't ready to fully forgive them yet. But I was open to the possibility, one day, when I was truly ready. For now, I focused on myself, on finding my own happiness and peace. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but they didn't have to define me. I was determined to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. Over time, the wounds began to heal. I found strength in the support of my friends and family, and through therapy, I learned to process my emotions and reclaim my sense of self. The betrayal left scars, but they became a part of my story, not the whole of it. Months turned into years, and I gradually built a new life for myself. I pursued new interests, made new friends, and even began to open my heart to the idea of love again. Trust was difficult, but I learned that it was possible to rebuild, step by step. My relationship with my mother remained strained, but we took small steps toward reconciliation. We met occasionally, and while things would never be the same, we found a way to coexist, acknowledging the past while trying to create a new future. The journey was long, but it was a path we walked together, slowly and cautiously. As for Joe, we went our separate ways. I never fully forgave him, but I did find it in myself to let go of the anger and resentment. I wished him well and hoped he found the peace he was searching for. In the end, the experience taught me resilience. It showed me that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, it was possible to rebuild, to heal, and to find a new path forward. Life was forever changed, but I emerged stronger, with a renewed sense of who I was and what I was capable of overcoming. And so, I moved on, carrying the lessons of the past with me, but not letting them define my future. The end of one chapter became the beginning of another, filled with hope, strength, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, leave me a little encouragement and tell me in the comments which country you're following me from.